Good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. I guess it's morning where in America. I just want to thank the hosts for putting on this conference. It's such an important issue. Thank the ministry, and thank you for the invitation. Virtual high five to Professor Moladina for setting up my very first slide here, or validating it, I should say. So I don't have to make the case to you that people in the United States care about raised without antibiotics or antibiotics in food animal production. But I do want to give you just a little bit of context because I think that it's super important that you know why. And over a decade ago, a bunch of NGOs, this is when I was at Pew, Natural Resources Defense Council, US PIRG, really powerful NGOs got together and said, you know what? Yes, we're trying to pass laws, but that's slow and regulation is slow. Maybe we should look at the marketplace. And so that's what we did. So we did two really strategic things. We picked a target audience, and that was moms, because they care about food and their kids. And not to say dads don't, but you know, we went with moms. So don't take me down on that. And we targeted specific companies. And guess what? It worked. We started to see companies like, we have a very large fast food chain called Chick-fil-A in the United States. They were the first to say, you know what? Everything we serve is going to be raised without antibiotics. It's going to cost us 10 more cents a sandwich. We're passing it on to the consumer. And their targets are, their people that eat there are mainly millennials and Gen Z. These are the two generations that are going to change how we eat in this country, or in America. This was quickly followed by two large chicken producers, Perdue and Tyson, the largest in our country. Now they advertise, raised without antibiotics. And then that was quickly followed by McDonald's, and I could go on, but I won't, because I don't want to see the scary red sign come out. But so why this is important is, since there's so much energy and interest in people marketing, we wanted to ensure that the label claims are actually what they say they are. Are the products really raised without antibiotics? And so labels in the United States, I think someone else made this point, are regulated by the US Department of Agriculture, or USDA. And specifically, it's through a branch called FSIS, the Food Safety Inspection Service. And so if you want to make a claim in the United States that you're not using antibiotics, you can use any of these words. So raised without antibiotics, no antibiotics administered, no added antibiotics, raised antibiotic-free, and no antibiotics ever. So you can use any of these and basically, and that can be on a package of meat that you purchase from the grocery store. And so really what we call these are credence claims. And what that means is you as a consumer can't validate it. You don't know how that animal was raised. You just have to trust in the label. And another good example, other than just raised without antibiotics, would be like no GMOs, right? Excuse me. As a consumer, you wouldn't know how that animal was fed, so it's trust. Sorry, I'm a hot mess between this and that. So the USDA on these claims requires documentation. So you do have to fill out paperwork. You have to usually have a certification or some kind of an audit. But there's no empiric testing. So it really is, basically a claim that you're promising that you're doing. You do sign an affidavit or a piece of paper saying you didn't use antibiotics, but no one is really checking by doing any kind of empiric testing. And we think that's a problem. So let me just ground you in the beef production, I don't know what you'd say, that supply chain in the United States. So it starts with the cow-calf operator. That's where the cows come from. When they're of age, they move over to a feed yard operator. Then they go to the meat produce. Then they become meat into the grocery stores or, restaurants as well. So you can see in those yellow or the orange arrows that there's a price benefit to all along the chain. And nobody's benefiting more than those grocery stores. But there's also a cost when you decide to be an RWA producer, a raised without antibiotics producer, and that's what all the stuff is on the bottom. So, and these are all compared to like if you're just a conventional farmer in the United States. And I won't read them all to you because you guys can do that, but I'll focus on one, and that's the feed yard operator, just because their list is the longest, so that seemed like a good one to highlight. So for them, they have to purchase their cattle from an RWA feeder. So for a cow-calf operator, they cost more money. They have to change the diet. They have to add more roughage so the animals don't get liver abscesses. Like I mentioned, they have to do RWA audits and certifications. That comes at a price. They have to have better management practices. That was touched on, I think, by your presentation. Excuse me. And then the animals are raised for a longer amount of time. So given that context, so producers, if they do have a sick animal, are faced with three choices. They can either treat the animal, tag him, take him out of production, and lose money. They can decide, well, we'll just let the animal be sick and cross our fingers that he gets better or goes off to slaughter and that nobody sees. And the last option would be, or since no one's watching, we could covertly treat and just not tell anybody. So in this system, and again, this is unique to our country probably, with lax oversight, basically if no one is looking, why should I tell? And then in addition, in this kind of an environment, it might be tempting to some to use antibiotics, since again, no one is looking for growth promotion purposes. And while growth promotion is technically disallowed in the United States, a whole lot of labels exist at preventative levels that are the exact same dose and duration of what our former growth promotion was. So there's a big old loophole in the United States. So basically, growth promotion is disallowed in name, but probably not in practice in a lot of cases. So that led us to do a study where we looked at the urine of animals being slaughtered to see if they in fact were free of antibiotics or full of antibiotics. So here's the numbers, here's what we did. So over 7 months in 2020, we tested 699 cattle. I don't know why it's not 700. What happened to that last cow? It's a mystery to all of us. We tested 312 lots of cattle, and what that means is a lot is a group of animals, so they move from their feed yard in groups called a lot, and so that's what that means. There were 33 feed yards, all in the state of California. We tested two cattle per lot, all going to the same abattoir or slaughter facility. And again, all of these cows were meant for the raised without antibiotics market. And so, oh, sorry, you guys. Huh. So those are the numbers I just went over. Okay, and so here's what we found. So the A to Z is the feed yards. So that's those 33. The little boxes that you see all represent a lot of cattle. One lot of cattle. And the colors are gray means no animal turned up positive. The lighter orange means one animal of the two we tested positive. And then the dark orange is 2 animals per lot tested positive. And then if you kind of move over, you can see that when you look at the proportion of animals represented by these lots, 5% of the cattle came from lots where all animals tested positive, and 10% came from lots where where one animal tested. So that's 15%. And I guess if you're a glass half full kind of person, you could say 85%. That's a solid B+. That's okay. But for our perspective, and from a consumer's perspective, we think that these numbers are horrible. They should be 0. This is an absolute claim. And so our center, we don't just do research, we also do advocacy and we do policy work. And so we want to drive consumers to a product. We want to say, buy less meat, but better meat. And this undermines our confidence in sending people to the RWA label. So, in case you're wondering, these are the two drugs that we found the most of, chlorotetracycline and oxytetracycline. These are what we call production drugs or production class drugs. These aren't, you don't inject them into an animal, you feed them at herd level. And they are also allowed for preventative use in conventional farming, so you can get that growth promotion benefit, but by calling it prevention, but by calling it something else. Oh, and we screened for 17 antibiotics, and those were the two that came up the most. So here we are today. So in our paper, we recommended that USDA do two things. We want them to either require, if you want to use the RWA label, or have USDA do empirical testing on a certain number of animals throughout the year, if you want to use the label. And we would also like to figure out how to test the feed that the animals are receiving as part of getting an RWA certification. And then I think it's important to note that, a lot of farmers, are in these programs may be doing everything right, but then they still have animals that are coming up sick for whatever reason. And so we'd like USDA to set up a fund for these farmers so that if they do have to tag that animal, send it into the conventional market, that they can put in for compensation. And we think this would also help mitigate that need or that, I don't know, the temptation, I guess I should say, to cheat. And so when the embargo lifted on our paper, the very first phone call we received was from USDA. And we were a little afraid at first, wondering why were they calling? Are they calling to yell at us? But in fact, they weren't. They were calling to say they read the paper with great interest, that they want to ensure that this label and other labels at the agency have integrity. They asked us to come in, present detailed findings, which we did. We had another meeting with them recently, and now we're in the process of outlining what a testing protocol could look like, either implemented by the USDA or by companies that want to use this label. And we'll be presenting that to them in October, so next month, later in the month. And we're hopeful that we'll start to see some reform, and we hope that, I don't know for other people in the room, but if you have these labels in your country, hopefully this can help inform so that we can actually have a label that we can sort of point to as the North Star when it comes to antibiotic use. And I didn't get the scary red sign, but that's my contact information. And then I also wanted to mention that our social media we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we're Battle Superbugs. So if you would like to follow us, we would love it. We'll follow you back and help share information on this important issue. So thank you very much.